Welcome to the Stewardship Sessions, the podcast where money meets meaning. Here, we talk about building wealth with wisdom, shaping a mindset rooted in purpose, and pursuing a mission guided by faith. I'm your host, Jason Stanley, and together we'll explore intentional living, one conversation at a time.
So welcome back. One of the things that I find fascinating is when you look at people who have a lot of success and stuff, what you find oftentimes is they never seem to retire. I mean, we take Warren Buffett, for example. He's 95 years old. He just now retired from managing Berkshire Hathaway. And yet I'm probably pretty sure he's still going into the office on a regular basis, still has some input on it. His business partner, Charlie Munger, who was in his 90s, passed away without ever retiring, And what's interesting about that is we live in this society where everybody talks about retirement. The average person talks about retiring and wanting to retire and stuff like that. We've talked about this before in the fact that most people, they have a job, they save up some money, and then they have this idea that when they retire, they're just going to be able to lay around and do nothing. And the really interesting thing is there's a lot of statistics around this. The instances of mortality increase, not just because you're retired, or not just because you're older, rather, but because for a lot of people, when they retire and they don't have a good plan in place, their health ends up suffering from it. They don't have the connections anymore that they used to have with people. When you think about it, a lot of times when you're involved in business, or you're involved in work and that kind of stuff, the people that you work with, that becomes your network. And in today's world, right, we're more connected than ever before, but we don't really have a lot of human connection. And I think that we as humans need that. We need that human connection. And so a lot of times what ends up happening, I've seen this play out quite a few times, I know a person who was a police officer and they couldn't wait to retire, right? And then they finally retired and they weren't any happier. They were putting off being happy, putting off being joyful until they retire, with this idea that somehow when they got there, they would suddenly be that person. Again, this goes back to what we've talked about in the past. You're not going to suddenly become the person that you want to be. You have to start doing those activities now in order to get there. But in this situation, I started looking at it as to why. Why would this person not be fulfilled now that they've completed their job and they're in that retirement stage? And you start looking at it, you start looking at how they interact with some of their peers. So now when they go out with their friends and stuff that are still working, they can't share in the stories. They can listen to the stories, but they don't have any input anymore because they're not involved in the day-to-day aspect of it. And so it's really interesting when you look at the really successful people, how long into life they actually continue to work. And it's not because they have wealth. I think it's because they have a strong desire to feel like that they're a part of something and to continue to push themselves to grow, And so I'm not a big fan of the word retirement. I'm not a big fan of this concept of retirement. Retirement was born out of a time period when we were really a manufacturing society, and most people worked on manufacturing lines, or they worked in labor-intensive type jobs where they were doing more manual labor, and your body would just break down over time, and you couldn't do the same thing. So you had to be able to retire. But we're so far removed from that now in today's world. Most people do not do manual labor. Most people are doing some sort of form of intellectual labor, right? Where if your mind is good, you can continue to operate it. So again, we look at people like Jack Bogle, who started Vanguard Funds. He worked well into his later years before he passed away. Like I said, Warren Buffett, 95, and he just now retired. And so what if you could build a life that doesn't require you to retire? And how would you even go about doing that? What would that look like? What does it take to do that? And I think the main difference between people who do that activity and the people who focus on retirement is, a lot of times, again, we have this idea that if we save enough money at a certain point in time, we will be able just to step away and just every day is a vacation. I can do whatever I want in that time period. And that's nice, I think, on paper, and it works well for maybe a week or a month or maybe even a year. But what I found in working in finance and working with people and helping them with their money is that most people end up going back to work in some form or fashion, whether they're doing contract work, whether they're doing the consulting work, or they just go get a job at least at Walmart saying hi to everybody coming in, And so, why is it that people oftentimes leave retirement to go do those activities? And again, I think it's because of that human connection. So how would you build that? What if you could build a life with yourself, with your family, that retirement becomes a non-issue? You're still involved to whatever extent that you want to be, but it's not an issue, right? And so the whole concept that I've been working on over the past couple episodes and what we're working on, pushing out is teaching people how to take the family and start to build net worth together. Again, your net worth is more important than your cash on hand. And we can go into that in another episode where we talk maybe a little bit more about that. But, what if you had different family ventures that you went and did together, different family investments that you did? Maybe you run some real estate together as a family of rental properties or apartment complexes or Airbnbs. What if you had other family businesses that you were able to invest in and you had family meetings? And now all of a sudden, retirement isn't required of you, right? You don't have to worry about somebody laying you off. You don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to make enough money. You don't have to worry about if that pool of money is there to get you through the rest of your life. Now you're focused on continuing the family legacy. And that's how these things start. So it goes back to some of the previous episodes that I talked about. It starts with setting out your family mission, values, and goals, right? It starts by teaching your kids about money. It starts by you then helping your kids become successful in what they're passionate about. You leverage your network to help them become, successful in whatever it is, with the expectation that money comes back to the family investments. And then you start building net worth as a family. And when you start doing that, again, like I said, you don't have to worry about retirement. So you start by doing those activities, and over time it starts to build into something else. I think a lot of times the reason people are so focused on retirement is they have gone out and they live this consumer lifestyle. They go get a job that they can do. They don't really enjoy it. They don't enjoy the process of it. But a lot of people, are focused on retirement because they're doing things that they don't necessarily enjoy doing. They are doing work that, they can't find a lot of joy in the process. And they're deferring happiness. They're deferring their joy to a future date. And they build this idea up in their head that over time, if I do this and I save enough money, then I will be able to go out and enjoy life. And what I would tell you is you can't live a deferred life. You have to be able to enjoy life now. There used to be people that would say, we've got it backwards. We should start our lives off retired and then work after we're older, when we can't do as much. And while again, I agree to some extent, but you want to be able to experience life on your terms. And the way you do that is by taking care of what you have, being a good steward of what you have, focusing on building net worth over your cash on hand. Again, that becomes a really important thing for people to understand. And most people just don't get it. They look at life as I have to go earn this money, save it all, keep it protected, right? Don't do anything else with it so that I can live on it later on. And, we've talked about, even the Bible says, a wise man will leave an inheritance for his children's children. And it's not that you're just going to hand money to your kids, but if you're teaching your kids about money and you're teaching your family about it and you're all working towards these goals, it becomes a lot more of a fun process. And so then you don't have to worry about having this pool of money and hoping that it lasts for the rest of your life and pays all your medical bills and hoping you don't outlive it. You're right. You have money coming in on a regular basis. So two main points to that. I would say cash flow is more important than cash on hand. And then secondly, building net worth is far more important than building how much money you have in the bank. Both are important to an extent. You do want to have money in the bank. You want to make sure that you can, pay your bills and that kind of thing. But this idea that you have to retire, one of the great things that I love about my life is that I don't have to ask anybody when I want to take time off. And I understand that's not everybody's situation. And maybe that's not your situation. But the cool thing is I can kind of go do whatever I want to be able to do. I can go do the activities, go take the trips I want to take. Now, oftentimes I'll have to knock out a little bit of work while I'm on those trips. Some people have a regular 9-to-5 job. When they take off work, they're off work. They don't have to do that. But I never wanted to have to ask somebody to be able to take time off. I never wanted to have to submit leave and all that stuff. I never wanted somebody to tell me that I couldn't take time off because something was going on. I wanted to be in control of that. And for the most part, I am. There are time periods where I have to delay, a trip or something like that because I have something that is pressing that I need to take care of. But I enjoy the process of business. And I enjoy doing what I do. I enjoy doing things like this. I enjoy building companies. I enjoy all of those things. And the enjoyment from those that I get from that makes it where it doesn't really feel like work. There are times that it's a headache. There are times where, I sit back and I go, man, maybe we should sell all of this and just retire, and then I think, well, what the heck would I actually do, And so I think it's just a matter of how you look at life and how you handle life. And again, this isn't the right answer for everybody. Some people are geared more towards working to an end point and then retiring and that kind of thing. But I'm saying if you're not that person, being honest with yourself and then looking at how you can create ongoing wealth and ongoing cash flow to where you don't have to retire, that you become the master of your life in that way, that you get to choose when you go on a vacation, you get to choose how you want to travel, you get to choose those things. And that's the life that I've built. And that's what my goal is to help people learn how to do that, learn how to do it as a family, because when you're doing it as a family, you're doing it as a team. And when you have a team, you cover much more ground than when you're trying to do something completely 100% on your own. And maybe you're just starting off in life. Maybe you are on your own right now. And that's okay too. But you can start to lay the groundwork for that kind of life, for this kind of life, very early. And being consistent. Again, our lives are just the result of compounded returns. And everything we do, every little behavior we do compounds into making us who we believe we are at that moment. And so if you're doing all the right things and you're being consistent with your finances, you're being smart with it, you're making good investments, right? You don't have to pick the next big, SpaceX IPO. You don't have to pick the next, stock that skyrockets, but consistently investing, consistently putting money to work and understanding the difference between net worth and cash on hand help you start to develop that type of life. And so, again, most people go through life and they don't think about net worth. Most people's net worth is tied up in their home, which I call it, if you remember from many episodes ago, we had John Prescott on, who's a real estate expert, and he said, home ownership is a forced savings plan, and I agree with him. for most people, that's their savings plan, is their home, because they'll be able to sell it later on in life, and that's where their pool of money will probably come from, or a good majority of it will be. So if you want to start to build a life that you're in control of, and you want enjoyment in what you do, start working now. If you have a family, start working with your family. Start coming up and devising a plan with how you're going to go out and build this life together as a family, right? And if you're focused on that, like I've said before, wherever your focus goes, there goes your energy, and whatever you're giving energy to, you're giving life to. And that ultimately will likely become the life that you have. And again, it's not anything big. You don't have to create a brand new product. You don't have to write the newest AI. You don't have to do any of that stuff, right? You just have to be consistent in little behaviors, and time is your biggest asset. Because the more time that you have to be consistent in that behavior, the more compounding returns that you're going to see. And I'm not just talking about money compounding. I'm talking about your activities compounding, So we've used this example before. If you go to the gym and you only go once, you're probably not going to be in shape, right? But if you do it consistently, you're going to be in really good shape, especially if you're good with your diet and you manage that really well, right? And so again, we live in this world of these compounding returns. Our entire life is about compounded returns. It's doing little things over and over and over and over again that help us get to where we want to go. And so, like I've said, if you want to be able to live a life where retirement's not even an issue, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to really start planning for it. Start building out ways to grow net worth. Start building out ways to increase your net worth. And over time, that will allow for you to still operate those things. You can still take care of those assets. You can still manage them, right? Which requires your mind, it requires some of your time, but you become in control of your life. And I, like I said at the beginning of this, I think it's ever amazing to me that there are some people that work until, they're very, very old, before they ever retire, 80s and 90s. That's just amazing to me. And that means, what that tells me is that those people are fulfilled in what they're doing. They're having fun in the process. So learn how to have fun at what you're doing. Don't make it about work. Don't make it about necessarily, I have to do all this stuff. Make it something that's fun. I think that one of the best ways to think about it when it comes to your money is each dollar that you put away, each dollar that you're investing or you're buying an asset with or you're putting to work. I always say, think of your money like this. Think of your money as every dollar that you get as a soldier. You can kill that soldier on the battlefield by spending it, or you can put that soldier to work and that soldier will go build an army for you. And then that army continues to grow over time. And when you think about how to manage money like that, now it becomes a lot more, in my opinion, fun, a lot easier to do, and it's a lot more tangible in that moment. A lot of people will start putting money away for something that they can't really get their head wrapped around. This idea of retirement, they're just throwing money out there and they hope that at some point in time they get to where they want to be able to go, right? What I'm saying is be more intentional with what you're doing and also change the talk around it. Hey, this dollar that I'm putting to work, excuse me, this $100, this $1,000, this $200,000, whatever it is that I'm putting to work, that's going to go build an army for me. That's going to allow for me to have cash flow off of it. That's going to allow for me to have the ability to, go out and purchase other assets and continue to grow. There's a reason why people who have high net worth, their net worth starts to compound faster. It's because they've been so diligent in these little things all throughout their life, and they hit this point of critical momentum where, they can't help it. Their net worth's just going to continue to grow, And here recently, Elon was announced to become the first trillionaire ever in history, right? And there's all kinds of stuff out there floating around about it. There's all kinds of people saying, well, he should solve all these problems. We should tax his wealth, that kind of stuff. He's got net worth. He doesn't have $1 trillion sitting in the bank. But that net worth is what is going to allow him to have whatever kind of life he wants to have. And net worth means that he owns a bunch of assets. Now, all those assets could collapse. All those assets could go to zero, and his net worth could go to zero. And that's one of the reasons why it's really hard for governments to try to tax net worth. But if you're smart about it and you do it the right way, those probabilities are really low that you would lose it all. But again, compounding returns. When you think about how your actions on a regular basis, so every time you receive that paycheck, every time you get money coming in, how do you view it? Do you look at it and go, hey, I'm going to go buy this, so that you get a dopamine hit and you feel good in that moment? Or are you going to say, hey, I'm going to put this to work? And you can get excited about putting it to work because you're watching it start growing and you're watching that net worth grow. And then you teach your kids about the same thing and you help them do the same thing. And then you go do family investments together. Now all of a sudden you're running a family business and a family empire, if you will. And you know, the size doesn't matter. That's all relative to what you want and what kind of life that you want to live. You know, for some people, $1 million is a lot of money. For other people, 200 million is a lot of money, right? So what you have to start to do is lay out what you want life to look like. How do you want this life to look like for you? How do you want it to look like for your family? You know, what if you could go have a family getaway that you go to every year as a family, right? You have a little family meeting, you discuss the family business, you have some fun and a vacation while you're there, and yet you don't have to talk to anybody about it. How would that feel? You know, does that get you excited? And if it does, you know, we've got some plans coming out to help people be able to do those things. If that's not you, that's okay too. You know, there's nothing wrong with working and retiring. But what I would tell you is if that is your plan, have a really good plan for what retirement looks like. You can't say, oh, I'm just going to go lay on a beach and have margaritas all day. That only works for maybe a week or two before you end up, you know, Jordan Peterson used this example. He's like, that only works for a couple weeks before you end up sunburned and cirrhotic and all this other stuff and feeling miserable, right? How are you going to take care of yourself? What are you going to do with your time? And then how are you going to give back? How do you give back? Because we get more fulfillment in our life by giving back, helping other people, and striving to change the world around us than we do by anything we consume. And I found that to be true in my own life. One of my favorite things to do is to teach people the things that I've learned. I've been through a lot in my life. I've had a lot of ups and downs, and like I've told you in the past, I've even been homeless, you know. And so it's not that life is easier for people who have money. It's not that life is easier for Warren Buffett, you know, at 95 than it is for you right now. It's that he is passionate about what he's doing. He's excited. He's excited about it, and he's working at giving back. So I apologize. I keep getting choked. I think I get some allergies rolling or something like that. But it's Texas this time of year. So anyway, just some food for thought. You know, it's a fun life to have if that's what you're passionate about, if that's something you're interested in. But until next time, take care, and we'll talk to you guys soon.